sinister than the definite form of terrible. You are charged
Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode 30 of the Spotlight Podcast, Success Stories for Veterans, where it is our job to break down and analyze titans from both the military and civilian communities to discover their tactics, their mindset, and their systems so that you can take those and apply those to your life and ultimately to your transition. These titans range from New York Times bestselling authors to former heads of state to other divergent thinkers who are out there dominating their field by challenging conventional wisdom. And today we have Carolynn Beck. Carolynn is a powerhouse litigation attorney. She's represented Fortune 500 companies, and she is currently a partner at Goldstein and McClintock, LLLP, representing companies and individuals in business and employment litigation. She has been admitted to practice in 4 different jurisdictions, and she did all of this while living the life of a military spouse. So how does Carolynn do it? Listen and find out. Carolynn, thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
So Carolynn, for people that aren't familiar with you and what you do, just give me the rundown. What is it that you do on a day-to-day basis?
Do you mean generally my job or more specifically my day-to-day, or both?
Both. If it's the job or if it's the day-to-day, what does it look like?
So I'm a litigator. And for those who are not lawyers, that means basically I am the lawyer that gets hired when business deals have gone bad and somebody's suing somebody else. I'll represent people on either side, the person who's been wronged and is suing, or the person who has done nothing wrong but is being sued by somebody who claims they have done something wrong. I also represent employees who have claims for wrongful termination or gender or race discrimination issues. My day-to-day is pretty hard to predict on a day-to-day basis. I mean, I might be working on a brief one day, and on another, I'm on back-to-back phone calls preparing for depositions or just networking with people and dealing with lawyerly things, going to hearings, stuff like that. Now everything's virtual, so I have to make sure my internet connection is working. Otherwise, I'm not going to get much work done.
Amazing how problems shift.
What's that?
I said it's amazing how problems shift like that.
Yeah. It's an interesting world to be a lawyer in. But for me, I've been working from home kind of out of my home for years now. At my previous job, I was working from home, but I was also making the trip up to DC or to New York pretty regularly to meet with people and with clients and things like that. But now everything's on Zoom. So
So when you're dealing with, being a litigator one day, which means, maybe back-to-back phone calls, or now you have internet problems, how is it that you actually go about breaking your day down so that you make sure that you don't miss anything?
That's a good question. So I do several things. I don't know if I actually have ADHD, but I have a pretty short attention span and I get distracted easily. So one thing that I do to deal with that is that every Sunday evening, I sit down and I think about what my week's going to look like. What are the things that I have to prepare for? What are the things that I absolutely have to get done that week? Who are the people that I need to connect with to make that happen? And I just take some time to think through that every Sunday night before the week really starts getting a little bit crazy and my email inbox starts getting unmanageable.
Yeah.
And every morning, before I dive into anything work related, I'll sit down and go through I absolutely have to do this today. It would be nice to get this thing done today. And it would be nice to connect with this person today. Like I just kind of sit down, put it together. Sometimes I write it down. Sometimes I'm just going through it in my head so I have the right mindset going into the day so that if something unexpected happens, I can get back to what my goals were for that day.
Gotcha. And when you're doing that on Sunday, how much time are you actually spending sitting down and walking through that?
It's probably something like 30 minutes to an hour max. Sometimes it's much quicker than that because I've been doing it regularly, so I kind of already have it in my mind. But the thing, when I skip this step, either in the morning or on Sunday nights, what I find is that there's too much noise in my head. I have trouble sleeping because my to-do list just keeps scrolling through like, oh, here are all the things you haven't done yet this week, or today, here are the things you failed to do, but if you have a list and you have a priority list, then I find that, at least for me, it allows me to kind of discard it from my subconscious sort of mind. I get less distracted by my own internal thoughts of like, oh my God, I have so much stuff to do. I'm so overwhelmed,
Yeah, absolutely. It's more like execution. One thing that I've noticed a lot of people who talk about who kind of resist that planning is like, well, the plan always changes. How often is that the case for you?
Oh, all the time. I mean, there are some to-do list items that I'll put at medium priority, like this would be nice to get done this week, that get pushed day to day to the week, but it still just helps, first of all, reminding myself that it's there.
Yeah.
But also, because I'm reminding myself that it's there, I feel less like I'm losing track or dropping the ball, even if my plans change. And plans change all the time if you're a litigator. Opposing counsel will do something unexpected. Your client will come up with some document that they forgot to tell you about. There's always something that happens in litigation that leads to a mad dash to a filing deadline that's like the next morning or whatever. And that will always jostle around your other, aspirational deadlines or whatever. But for me, the noise in my mind is much more distracting than the day-to-day stuff that pops up that throws my plan off track.
Gotcha. So you talked a little bit about planning as a way to kind of reduce the noise in your mind, and correct me if I'm wrong here, being a litigator can be a pretty high stress job.
Yeah.
How do you handle the mental noise, or how do you basically maintain your mental health in the face of all of that?
I'm getting better at this. This was hard for me for quite a long time, especially between, just dealing with being a military spouse generally and having like the constant distraction and I don't know if disruption is the right word, but it is a change in your day-to-day routine on a personal level when your husband is constantly traveling and then coming back and you're tripping over his duffel bag when you're trying to go get your coffee or whatever, But I have found that I am much calmer, happier, better able to deal with stress when I intentionally make time in the day for myself. And that might mean during a really busy period, basically just getting up an hour early and drinking coffee and staring into space by myself. Like just I've been told I should meditate. I've tried it, but the staring into space with my coffee in the morning for 10 minutes still does wonders for me for the rest of the day, just having that quiet time. And by the way, I don't even have kids, so I don't know what I would do if I had kids waking me up at, 4 in the morning, 5 in the morning, whatever it is. But for me, that's my me time. Nobody's bothering me. Even the dogs don't want to get out of bed because I'm getting up earlier than they want to. And what enhances that sort of well-being kind of mental health situation, I don't know what else to call it, that feeling of well-being and steadiness and ability to deal with the day-to-day stress is when I make more time and actually get my workout in the morning. Because when I skip my workout, I'm thinking about maybe I can get it in later. Maybe I can skip dinner and do a little spin workout. Maybe I can go for a run, which I'll never do because I hate running. But it's it's another piece of mental noise that I don't like to distract me. So it's a check in the box that allows me to go, well, I got one thing accomplished today that I really wanted to do. And just kind of getting the blood pumping, listening to some music that I really like. It's that alone time. I've always been a little bit of an introvert. I don't know if people that met me more recently really realize that, but I was so much of an introvert that I had to plan phone calls to friends with my mom. You know, I'd ask her how socially I should be interacting with my friends. That's how scared I was of social interaction. So I'm sure at some level, there's some low level stress that happens that I'm not aware of that kind of hits me all at once if I'm not working out, eating right, you know, taking time to myself to just be completely alone.
Yeah. So besides working out and, you know, just planning your week, are there any types of resources like for, you know, learning that you recommend to people to kind of help, you know, just expand your mind in general?
That's a good question. I think it kind of depends on if you're somebody that learns well from listening or from reading. I've never been a listen to stories and really enjoy it kind of person, although sometimes I will listen to podcasts and audiobooks, but I absorb material much more easily when I actually dig into the text of a book or am doing online research by myself. And a habit that I've picked up over the years is that I'm usually reading some nonfiction book, whether it's a self-help book or a book about how to build your business relationships or how to negotiate from a, you know, former hostage negotiator or whatever. There was one that I read recently that was like that.
I know which one you're talking about. It's Never Split the Difference. Am I right?
Yeah. I'm reading Kindle books all the time. Every morning I listen to, there's a Spotify channel called Your Daily Drive.
Yeah.
And that I find, I'm not driving anywhere. Usually I'm just walking my dogs.
That counts.
But I find it to be a really nice way to get caught up on the most current kind of high profile news. They usually throw in something from Robinhood about stocks, and then a selection of whatever your music is that you like to listen to on Spotify. Yeah. And so it's a combination of all of those things. I'm not actually sure if I've answered your question, Carson.
No, that's actually good. It's an amalgamation of things. But let's go to the books for just a second, because you said that you really kind of learned from digging into text. What texts are you using besides Never Split the Difference, which I think we already talked about? What are the other ones that you're working on right now?
Right now, I'm reading 3 books. One of them is fiction and is just purely for my own enjoyment. But one of them is called The History of Nearly Everything. The other one is called Conscious. And it's a book. Both of these are on Amazon Prime. I just decided one day I'm going to go on Amazon Prime and see what books are on there that look interesting and pick a few. So I'm reading all 3. My other one is The Invisible Life of Addie LaRue, which is it's a fictional novel about a girl who like wishes that she didn't belong to anyone, and then suddenly nobody can remember her. So
sounds tragic.
It's an interesting book. It's a very interesting concept, but obviously not as informational as these other ones. Conscious is a book that I'm only in the first couple chapters because I just started these 3 this week. But Conscious is a book about consciousness. Like what does it actually mean? Like if you have an AI that acts like it has empathy, when do you know when it crosses that line where it's actually feeling empathy versus having been programmed to feel to do the things that a human should do when they're feeling empathy? It's a really kind of a interesting book. The other one, I have no idea where this is going to eventually go, but right now I'm reading the portion about the Big Bang and time travel, things like that. So it started very, very far back at the beginning of everything that we know of as humans, and supposedly we'll go through nearly everything else.
Well, there's a lot to dig into just with those book choices, I think. Can we talk about the Invisible Life of Addie LaRue?
Sure.
So when you're reading fiction, what is it that you're getting from fiction that you don't necessarily get from other areas of your life?
I've always been kind of a bookworm. It goes way back to when I was an introvert. Yeah. And I think the one thing, I don't know if it's life, it's not a life lesson, but a mindset that I have that I think has originated just from being a book reader since I was little, is that whenever I hit a rough patch in my life, I try to remind myself of what the main character in a book would do if they hit that rough patch. I'm going through a really tough time right now. If I was the main character in a book that eventually has a happy ending, with the main character having a successful career and a happy home life and everything, would they just curl up into a ball and give up on everything? Or would they find new strategies to make this failure or kind of hurdle into an opportunity? And I don't know when I started thinking that way, but I've always kind of had that mindset. So, and I'm really hard on myself whenever I fail in little or big ways. It's something that I struggle with still. And that is always just so helpful for me to reset my frame of reference. Like, okay, you're not dead yet. So, so you're still at a chapter in your life where you have some choices to make. You can choose your own adventure, So yeah, I don't, Addie LaRue, I found it to be an interesting description. I was intrigued by the idea of this girl. So it's this, hopefully I'm not giving any spoilers to all your,
I'm sure people are really upset.
Listeners who plan on reading this book, but I'm not super far in that book anyways yet. So this girl, very independent, strong-willed, has ideas that are not really aligned with her time. Her parents want her to get married. Her future husband's super boring and kind of like not really her type. Obviously, I'm paraphrasing. And she goes and makes a wish in the wrong place at the wrong time that she will never belong to anybody and that she can do whatever she wants for the rest of her life. And then suddenly, like, her mom and dad don't remember her, and it's interesting because it goes from that time period in like 1714, I think, back and forth from then to like 2014, and describes her life after she's adjusted to being forgotten constantly. Really wishing that cute guy that she met at the bar would remember her the next morning,
That actually sounds pretty painful. Besides Addie LaRue, are there any heroes from stories that you find yourself that you really relate to, that you go to, or you're like, okay, I really need like my Frodo moment right now?
That's a good question. I don't think so, because I feel like whenever I'm thinking of this, I'm thinking of future me. I'm thinking of future Carolyn, current Carolyn, past Carolyn who like had to ask her mom how to make a phone call to a friend. I've come pretty far from that Carolyn. So, and I think that I have a hard time really idolizing or trying to emulate like specific people in specific positions. There are a lot of people that I admire and I think have done a really great job getting to wherever they've gotten based on the circumstances that they've had. But I've never really had somebody that I fully related to, that I felt like, I feel like everybody sort of has something unique to give, and that if you try too closely to emulate somebody else's journey, you can kind of hinder your own creativity and your ability to rethink where you are and what the possibilities are for you, based on where you are and what sort of unique characteristics you have, and the type of life you have. I mean, even just thinking about being married, I don't have a relationship that I would have imagined as a little girl. I thought by now, by the way, that I'd be like a brain surgeon and be living in a mansion, and because My husband obviously would have also been a brain surgeon. And we'd have like 4 or 5 kids. As a little girl, that's what I thought everybody wanted for me. And I hadn't really given much thought to where do I want to be when I grow up. Child me would be horrified that at, my age, which I will not disclose on this podcast, I still have no plans to have children. And I'm happy with that. I'm fine with that, but it's not necessarily something that I would have chosen if I was planning out my entire book, my life,
Yeah, if that had been your Sunday planning session, it might look differently.
Right.
So there's a lot there, but I want to switch gears real quick because you were talking about the people that you admire and saying that you don't follow too closely, and I've heard a lot of people say that. I think it's wise advice, but when you're looking at who do I admire versus the people I just kind of that you kind of let go out the back door, how do you determine who those people are that you listen to versus the people that you don't, i.e. people that might be bullshitters, right?
That's a really good question. I feel like there's multiple levels to it. One, I think whenever somebody is giving me advice, I think there's always something that I can learn from really anybody, because like I referenced earlier, like everybody is at a different place in their lives. They have made different life choices. They have different experiences. They've probably done something that they're proud of that they can share with you. Yeah. The real question is whether and how big of a grain of salt you should use when you try to apply that advice to your own life. Because I've had lawyers tell me that the best way to develop a book of business, for example, is just to put your head down and work really hard and bill really high hours. I think working hard and being a good associate at a law firm is important. It's a baseline, but that's not how to build a book of business. And usually when you're listening to that person giving you advice, you have to think about, okay, well, is that person at a stage in their life that I want to end up in later? Like, is that a chapter I would like to also have in my I'm continuing to follow this very tired book concept.
Stick with it. It works.
You really have to think about who you're getting this information from. I think it's important information. I think it is really important for a junior associate at a law firm to work really hard, to do really good work. And even as a partner pitching for business, you want there to be some level of trust and confidence from your potential client that you're going to do good work. And you can't do that without a good record. So, but again, that's not the answer to the question. It's not an answer to how do you build a book of business. There's so much more, there are more layers to that. And that information you're probably going to get from somebody who has a giant book of business and has built it themselves, not necessarily had it handed to them by somebody else.
Right. So to sum that up, would it be fair to say then you're really looking for people who are doing what you're trying to do?
Yeah. Okay. Somebody who is somewhere that you want to eventually be. Gotcha. Now or later.
So let's go back, because I want to hit back on this, because you talked about family, and I think that that's a very important conversation, especially as you're talking to professionally ambitious people, which I know you are, and a lot of people who listen to this podcast are also that. How do you manage the family component when you've got all the things that we've talked about that you've been doing on top of this, and you've got deployments in there? What are the conversations look like between you and your spouse as all this is going on?
It's changed over time. I've been with my husband for quite a long time. It was much harder at the beginning because I had a lot of what I now see, or at least consider to be what's the word? I'm trying to find the right word for this. I don't think that they were stupid desires, but I think that they are less important than other relationship goals that we have established. So I'll give you an example. You know, anniversaries used to be really important to me. Specific dates, specific events, like they used to be very important to me. But as a military spouse now, I have a really hard time remembering how long I've been married, for example, or, you know, the important dates that would have been important to younger me, but now matter less because if my husband is not here on a specific special day, Valentine's Day, anniversary, Christmas, I mean, we've missed all those special days multiple times because of his job. It matters less to me now. Because to me, I'm the nature of the job is such that you kind of have to be flexible and you make the best of when he's home. So we have celebrated our anniversary like 6 months in advance because we know that he's going to be gone, you know, and it doesn't fit in anywhere else in my work schedule. And we go all out, you know, we'll save up money for it and we'll go to, you know, I don't know. I'm trying to think of a recent one where he told the hotel ahead of time, you know, we're celebrating our anniversary. We showed up and actually it was kind of funny because he did all this planning and everything was perfect except that the hotel staff got my name wrong. So we showed
Please
up.
tell me it's like Carl.
No, we showed up and there were roses and they were beautiful. It was a beautiful hotel room and, you know, chocolate covered strawberries and champagne. And then you open the card and it says, "Happy anniversary, and I love you." But, you know, I feel like it's really important. We saved that card, by the way. I thought it was hilarious.
I would hope so. Maybe you got like 50% off because they're like, well, we had an and.
Yeah, no, I mean, it provided so much entertainment value that we didn't complain. But I mean, I think the two things that have been most important for us is flexibility, and a sense of humor. You know, when your spouse is deploying to dangerous places and sometimes deploying to less dangerous places, but you just never know what's going to happen or when or whether he's going to come back. And I knock on wood every time I say that. You learn to be grateful for the time that you have together and the petty little fights. Like I mentioned earlier, I'm tripping over his work gear constantly. Yeah. If we saw each other all the time and that was always a problem, I'd be much more mad about it. But because his duffel bag being in the middle of my hallway means that he's home, it's just kind of, it's in some ways it's annoying still, but it's also something we joke about, and it's, you know, it's not something that is worth fighting over. Right. I'm sure the adjustment's going to be tough once he retires because I'm no longer going to be able to make these excuses for him in my head. Yeah. But I guess, you know, it's a long-winded way of saying really, truly don't sweat the small stuff, and find a way to make this life work for you in a way that makes you happy. Like give up the stuff that doesn't really matter to you, and the stuff that does matter, make it work. Find some way to do it, even if you have to book your anniversary trip 6 months in advance.
Yeah, it's not bad. So we're going to switch gears real fast because one thing that I really wanted you to talk about, because I think I would put you as like a world-class expert in this area, because we've known each other for a long time. For the people that are listening, we've been, like 5 years now?
I think so, yeah.
What I've been most impressed by is the fact that you can move to different markets and just find a great job. And people are like, yes, we need you. Tell me about how, when you are switching markets or switching jobs, how do you approach that? And I know it's a big topic, which is why I want to dive into it.
It is a big topic. And you, because you've known me in the last 5 years, think that it's easy. But believe me, it's oh my gosh, there were times when I was a younger attorney that I was sure I would never find a lawyer job. Oops, excuse me. Sorry, I don't know how to mute my desk phone yet.
Oh, that's all right.
It's all about networking, and that's really simplifying something that is really hard still for me. And it has a lot of layers to it. Again, this last move that I did from California out to the East Coast was a lot easier than the first time I had to move out here when I was a fresh graduate out of law school. And the reason for that was that my entire network, all the people in positions to make introductions, to help me do informational interviews, etc., were all on the West Coast. I had made no effort to learn about my USC law alum out on the East Coast or to stay in touch with people who had moved out here. And I also had a mindset that I needed to find a job in the specific city where my husband had gotten stationed. And to illustrate, like, at the time, the types of jobs that I was getting offers from, I mean, back then I was applying to everything that was available here. And somebody offered me a job to work in bankruptcy litigation as a first-year associate for like $25,000 a year or something. And I told him, but I was like, I feel like I'd make more working at PetSmart as a pet. And his response to me was like, the market's really bad out here. You should be grateful to get an offer. And nothing against bankruptcy litigation. Like there are a lot of people that find great success in that area, but I wasn't interested in that area. I also wasn't interested in working for somebody who felt he was doing me a favor by giving me a job offer. So I started utilizing my networking tactics that I had been using in LA out here in the areas where the jobs were that I wanted. So I started sending emails to USC alum, told them up front, hey, fellow USC alum, I just moved to the East Coast. I'd love to meet with you for coffee, just 15 minutes. If you don't have time for coffee, a phone call would be great. I would just love to introduce myself and learn more about what you're doing. Did not tell them that I would have to drive 3.5 to 5 hours, depending on traffic, just to meet them for 15 minutes for coffee. Because to me, that was worth it if it got my foot in the door. So that actually helped me build my network pretty significantly out here. Eventually, I ended up with a job with a very small firm doing some litigation, administrative work, and criminal defense work, which I don't do now, but back then I was just grateful to have that variety of experience. I had a full-time job offer at some point lined up. I had taken the Virginia bar exam and passed it. And then my husband got stationed in California again. But luckily I had already been working on my network on the West Coast. And I had stayed in touch with all of the people that I still consider a lot of them friends. Back then I reached out to a mentor and I said, hey, I'm moving back. Do you know of anybody who's looking for an associate at my level? And actually he did. So they said, we're about to go to trial. We need somebody with your level of experience. Can you be here in 2 days? And I said, no, I need 4 days. So I packed my Mini Cooper at the time with all my stuff, moved into my apartment, went straight to trial. Moving back out here was really different because I realized the value of having that network during that experience. And so I was much more intentional about building those relationships. And when I say building my network, like I'm not just reaching out to people and continuing to ask for informational interviews. It's like, you know, my network, I consider the people in my network to be my friends. And I think about the ways that I can provide value to them. And when I'm meeting somebody, I'm asking them, are there any introductions that I can help you with? Is there something you're working on that I can help you with? And I'm asking because I want to help. Because I've been helped by my network, and I want to give that value back to whomever needs it that is in my network. And over time that pays off, you know. It's not, again, I'm not doing it because I know it pays off, but certainly it has a benefit that I saw when I was looking to come back out here. I mean, I think I told you, Carson, I had multiple job offers coming back to the East Coast, and I think I must have had a phone call with you where I was like, what do I do? Which of these do I take? Here are all the paths, and here's where I could end up if I go to this firm versus this firm versus this firm. And eventually, you know, I ended up in a job where I'm lucky enough to be able to just work from home. Nobody expects me to be anywhere unless I have planned to be there. Right. But it was a long process to really get here. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I don't know if that was too vague or high level. I'd be happy to provide any kind of details.
Oh, you know, I've got follow-up questions. So when you're going and you're asking people, especially when you're that new, I call it new networking, where you're still in that informational interview phase, how receptive were people to those initial emails that you were sending and saying, hey, let's go get coffee, or if not coffee, you know, can we do a phone call?
Surprisingly open to meeting with me. I was surprised. I did send a lot of emails, but all of them were customized to the individual I was reaching out to. And a lot of them were cold emails because I didn't have a network out here. Mm-hmm. But I don't think there were many people that refused to meet with me. I think there were maybe a couple that failed to respond quickly, mm-hmm. and it was just because they were busy. But the instinct when you're new to this is like, oh, they must be offended that I reached out, or they must think it's a waste of time. But actually, one of them, because I didn't follow up, emailed me later and said, be persistent if you want to be a lawyer. Why didn't you follow up with me? I want to meet with you. And I was kind of like taken aback by that. So I was like, well, that's weird. That's a weird thing to say, but it's really good advice. You know, a lot of times people are just busy. And I've experienced that when law students or kind of junior associates reach out to me now. Like sometimes you flag the email or do whatever in Outlook, and then you get busy, and then you completely forget until a year later, and you're like, oh, did you end up finding a job? But if they are following up and they're doing it in a way that's not intrusive or pushy, you know, and so one thing, and actually I learned this, you probably learned this from the same online course that I learned it from, Carson.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah, but you know, Ramit Sethi, he has a course called Dream Job, and I think it was in that course where he talks about follow-up emails, and I think it's really good advice that I didn't learn until later. And it's, if you follow up, you should follow up. Busy people will forget about you, not because it's you, but just because they're busy. But if you follow up with like a quick email that says, hey, just bring this to the top of your inbox. Hopefully, you know, you haven't lost track of it. I know you're busy, sort of acknowledging that they're busy and that you value their time, not being pushy or annoying about it, then they're going to make time if they have time.
Yeah, I've noticed that too. I think there's a lot of fear, especially for people who are doing this for the first time, that, oh my, you're going to get some blistering emails like, why did you email me, you piece of crap? How dare you? I am so important. Yeah, exactly. So I know you're busy, and I know we're running low on time because you've got desk phones ringing and all that. But the last question I want to ask you is, if you had like a magic wand and could impart one piece of advice to professionally ambitious post 9/11 veterans that are either transitioning or for the first time asking themselves, like, what do I want to do? What would you offer them?
Well, the storybook concept, first of all, I think is really important for mindset. But I know we've been talking about networking already, but I can't emphasize enough how important that is, even just to figure out what it is that you want to do next. Because and do your research before you meet with somebody who you want to ask questions. The way that you bring value to a meeting like that is by doing your research, demonstrating that you've done the research. You show up and you say, hey, here's the stuff that I looked up. Here are the questions that I still have that I can't figure out that I would love to talk about with you. It's not weird to write it down and bring it with you. It's probably going to be appreciated by the person on the other side, who's going to feel that you are valuing their time, and acknowledging that they're busy and that they're taking time out of their busy day to talk to you. Yep. And I mean, a lot of this, I take for granted now, but I don't know that it's really something that comes naturally to most people. It certainly didn't come natural to me when I was more junior. So, and the other thing, when you are asking somebody for value, so if you, for example, have asked somebody to make introductions for you, and they make those introductions, it's really important to follow up. That's one way that you provide value. So I've made introductions to people. I take time to write the introductory email, and I run it by both sides. So I'll say, hey, I'm about to introduce you to somebody. Is it okay if I say this about you, or do you have any tweaks or anything you'd like me to add? I'm spending time to do this introductory email because I really want to make sure it's a good connection for you. I have had situations where the person who has asked me for the introduction never follows up, never actually connects with the person that I introduced them to. And I never find out if they actually did anything with the time that I spent. And it would mean so much. It does mean so much to me when people circle back and they say, hey, thanks so much for the introduction. Like, I followed up with her, we scheduled a phone call, and here's what has happened. And a lot of people, I think, don't realize that is providing value. You're letting me know that I have provided value and that my time was not wasted.
Yeah. Well, Carol, that's all fantastic advice. Thank you so much for joining us. It was a pleasure having you on.
It was fun chatting with you. Thank you.
Thanks, Carolyn.
Bye.
Hey everyone, thanks again for listening to another episode of the Spotlight Podcast. And I just wanted to take a second to ask you who you think should be interviewed on the show. Who do you think is out there that's just absolutely crushing it that the veteran population needs to hear from? That's what we want to hear from you. Send us your suggestions to spotlight@thezenveteran.com. That's SPOTLIGHT @thezenveteran.com. Thanks again for listening.